Good morning. We will begin this morning with some gathering music from Sandra Thomas. Thank you, Sandra. Good morning again, and welcome to Westside Unitarian Universalist Church. My name, for any of you who may not know me, is Ellen Greenwood. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am the worship associate for today's service. We welcome you here with us in person today, and we welcome you just as warmly if you are joining us virtually on YouTube, either now in real time or perhaps at some time in the future. We are a welcoming congregation that seeks to affirm each person who chooses to worship with us, regardless of who you are or how you identify spiritually or in any other way. I hope that each of you who are here in person will stay after the service for coffee and conversation. If you are a visitor, I would encourage you to stop by our visitors corner right over here by the the side back of the sanctuary, conveniently close to the coffee pot. But there you will find some information about West Side specifically and about Unitarian Universalism in general. There are a few announcements before we get started this morning. These mostly are in your order of service. And then I think if you're at home, they are also on your screen. I do have one other important event that I should mention. Excuse me. If you're interested in learning about membership at Westside, there will be a new member event Saturday, October 1st at 12:30. Reverend Carol Baudot, our minister, and our membership coordinator, Elizabeth Corbett, as well as a few other leaders from the congregation, will meet, I suppose this is here at Westside, here at Westside at 12:30 to share a meal and talk about our congregation's history and the future that we can all create together. Everyone is welcome, whether you are just really pretty sure you want to become a member right now, or whether you just want to kind of figure out what that even means. There are no obligations if you come to this meeting. This morning, we're going to hear about a fairly difficult subject. We're going to be hearing and learning about human trafficking in our area. And as we enter into this time together, I'm going to invite our bowl to sing. It started without me. This is our chance to center ourselves, quiet our minds, and focus on creating space here together among us and in our hearts as we consider this very important and difficult topic. Our guest speaker for today, Samantha Monday, is going to light our chalice as I read some chalice words for us. A month or two, maybe 2 months ago, we dedicated an entire service to the meaning and history of our flaming chalice, and we talked then about how the history of the flaming chalice as a symbol of Unitarian Universalism stems not entirely, but primarily from rescue work that was done in Europe during the 1930s and 1940s. And so I think it's important that we recognize that rescue work of all kinds goes on forever. And the chalice lighting I have chosen today is by Pat Uribe Lichty, and it is called We Who Are Called to Be. Our chalice is a reminder that in hard times, our ancestors in faith acted with courage to bring hope and safety, to bring life itself to threatened people. We light it today as a reminder of who we are called to be in a world still dangerous and despairing, with courage and faith to bring ourselves to the work before us. Our minister, the Reverend Carol Baudot, cannot be with us today because she's with another group of Westsiders and Earth Church people in the Great Smoky Mountains for a Spirit Quest weekend. But she will be back next Sunday, and we will be celebrating the fall equinox. But today we are very honored to have Samantha Monday as our guest speaker. She has spoken with us before, and I know I have, and I imagine those of you who've heard her have found that what she has to say is challenging and informative. Samantha is a licensed alcohol and drug counselor with Knox County Sheriff's Office. She has been working as a clinical case manager for the last 6 years, working with individuals who struggle with addiction, homelessness, mental health, and many other issues. She assists individuals with going to treatment, assessing sober living, mental health appointments, or whatever their needs might be. In the past 6 years, she has assisted 1,321 individuals move back into the community. This is after incarceration, right? Yeah. Prior to this position, Samantha worked with the same population in various capacities for about another 6 years. In the past, Westside has supported the work that Samantha does by providing clothing and other items for individuals who are re-entering society after spending time in jail. And we definitely appreciate Samantha giving us the opportunity to partner with her in this work, and we look forward to hearing what she has to share with us today.
Good morning. I want to update you guys since the last time I was here. First, I want to thank you for all the support, the clothing, the donations, all the donations you guys are making to Carm. I get those gift cards from Reverend Carol. Those come in great handy if we're running low on specific sizes of pants or whatever, and you'll find me running through Carm at odd hours of the evening because I've got somebody leaving custody the next day. So that has been a huge help for us. My partner and I, she works with me on a daily basis. She and I have worked together for the last 4 years. And we kind of split up what we're doing based on the charges of the individual, but she does the exact same work I do. Her name is Lakin Conley. She's amazing. And we work together, and so you guys have done a huge support for us, especially with winter clothes a couple years ago, because folks come to jail, they're not usually typically worried about what they're going to look like leaving or if they have the proper clothes. And sometimes they stay there through the season change and they may not have a coat, a sweatshirt, or something that they need to get back out. And the other part of that is nobody wants to go sit in a treatment facility trying to improve their life and worried about whether they're going to have clean underwear to wear the next day. So probably the most heartbreaking phone call I got was a family member was supposed to bring somebody clothing to the treatment facility and the family didn't show up. And on day 3, he called me and all he asked for was clean underwear. Wasn't worried about anything else. So you guys are making a big difference for those folks as they go into treatment and get the things that they need so that they can focus on getting better and healthier as they come back out into the world. So I really appreciate it. Obviously, my numbers are huge as far as the last 6 years. That's not all of them in total, but those are the ones that I've kept track of. The numbers for this year continue to skyrocket. I've had the busiest summer I've ever had in my career. I can't tell you exactly why. Part of that's the numbers in the jail are going up because COVID doesn't exist. Part of that is the addicts are getting scared of all the fentanyl and they don't want to die, so they're switching to meth as their drug of choice or a mixture thereof. And meth is a zero tolerance if you're on state probation, so if you test positive for meth, you're coming to jail. Doesn't matter if it was once or if it's something you're doing every day. That became part of the Public Safety Act of 2016. I don't agree with it, but that's what happens. So those numbers are continuing to go up. We're averaging about 1,300 inmates in our jail across the board every day right now. So it's kind of alarming that those numbers have more than doubled in the last 2 years back in the jail. So I just wanted to give you an update. I'm going to do a little bit of storytelling today because I want you to kind of see what some of these folks go through. But I'm not as good a storyteller as my Uncle Tracy, if you guys have heard him speak, so please don't hold me to that level because he's much better at it than I am. But I'm going to start out and talk about 3 people that I have worked with that have been through trafficking situations. I'm going to change their names so that hopefully nobody figures out who they are. Some of them are not even in the area anymore, but that's okay. The first one I'm going to talk about is a male. We're going to call him Ross today. This is a gentleman who caught himself up, became a drug addict, found himself in a situation, he's on probation, he gets a job. These people are like, we're gonna give you this fabulous job. They invite him in, he's working this job, he loves it, he's doing a great job, and they're like, you know what, we see that you're struggling and you're in a sober living house.
Excuse me.
Sure.
I'm having trouble hearing.
Okay.
The microphone needs to be a little closer or
I can move closer.
something.
Okay. Is that better? Okay.
Jonas, yeah, that's good.
Okay, so this individual, he's getting this job, he's working this job, he loves it, he's getting to work with animals, and they're like, you know what, you're doing a fabulous job, we've got a rental property that we're gonna let you come live in, the rent's gonna be super cheap, and so he takes this house. He's worked so hard through his recovery, he gets his children back, right? We think he's doing fabulous. Probation thinks he's doing great. Well, after about 6 months of living in this rental house, they decide that now, in order for him to stay there, he's going to start having to have various sex acts with any gender or anybody that they decide. Okay? And they're like, if you're going to stay here, this is what you're going to do. If you're going to keep your job, this is what you're going to do. And understand, if he's on probation and he doesn't have a job and he doesn't have a stable place to live, he's coming to jail. Okay, so he's going to do sex acts because it's either that, lose everything he's worked for, and come back to jail because he doesn't know what else to do. This went on for months and months, which turned into years. He's meeting with probation officers, he's meeting with counselors, he's meeting with therapists on a regular basis, but at no point did he think to say, this is what's happening. He stuck it out because he didn't want to lose his children. Well, eventually, the recovering drug addict, that took its toll. He had a relapse, lost his children anyway, lost his place to live, back to jail. Now, this is a gentleman I'd worked with and watched him grow and thought he was doing great because I didn't know any better either. Finally, I go in and I sit down with him and I'm like, what am I missing? Something's wrong. There's a bigger problem here. And he just stared at me. Finally, the tears start to come and he admits what's going on. So he had been the straight definition of trafficked, human trafficking in this town, under everybody's noses, with authority to do something about it, and nobody knew. We'll circle back to where he is now a little later. The second we're going to talk about, we're going to call her Candy. Candy was swept up off the roads of Knoxville. She was taken to Texas, and she was trafficked for drugs. She did the sex act. She got the drugs that she needed so she didn't detox, and this is what she did every day of her life. She was young, she was cute, she was exactly what they wanted. She eventually, as intelligent as she is, decided, I don't want to live like this anymore, and started looking for a way out. Obviously, when you're in that situation, you're still worried about the detox. How am I going to get away, and how am I going to get away safely? because these folks, she had ran before, and they found her, and they brought her right back. There was no getting away. She was in a car, in the backseat of the car, riding down the road, and I believe it was Houston. And in the middle of the street, she bolted out the side of the car in the middle of the night and rolled in front of another vehicle. She made sure there was another car behind them. She took the road rash, she took the injury, she took the impact. Thank God the car behind her stopped to get out to check on her. That's what saved her life. They got out, they took her to the hospital, they called 911, and she was safe. She's never lived that life again, and we'll talk about where she is again in a few minutes. The last one, I'm gonna call her Tori. This one is probably the closest one to my heart. This lady was in her 40s. At 38 years old, having been the youth minister, had a bachelor's degree, she had everything you would think would take her and make her be successful in life. And she had been. At 38, her husband left her. He left, he took the 2 young children, told her she couldn't see them, and she did not know how to cope with that. She turned to a life of drugs. The life of drugs got her trafficked. She began having to perform sex acts to get the drugs, and she really didn't totally understand the manipulation that was going on with these folks and what they were doing to her. She believed that the person that was her roommate, who happened to be male, who was dating other people, who had a life, who had a good job, and I distinctly remember the laugh I had with the attorney because the roommate worked at Verizon, so obviously he was a good person. He had to be okay, and it was all I could do not to laugh in this gentleman's face because I feared that this was the ringleader. So again, this was somebody who'd been on probation. She was meeting with therapists and counselors and probation officers, and they had no idea what was going on until she had another relapse. Even though she's still living in that house and they're still manipulating her, she just managed to not fill a drug screen. So eventually it caught up with her. She's in jail. Within about 3 minutes of the conversation, I started putting the pieces together. And I'm like, this doesn't add. Who's this gentleman? He's doing what? Okay. And I used the words. I'm like, do you understand that you're trading sex for drugs? And she just stared at me for a very long time. Again, a highly intelligent individual. So I let that rest for a few minutes because I don't push folks. Eventually she was like, oh, this happened. She started looking at her life from the outside looking in and realized what was going on. She was due to be out of jail. I got put in a spot where the judge wanted her to serve a sanction. He was going to let her out. I had a very uncomfortable conversation with a bunch of men in the chambers, and I was like, I can't let her leave. She's in danger. I got a week to figure that out. So the best I could do is I put her in a sober living that I trusted, had a long conversation with her and the staff that she was going to be on house arrest, that she was not to go out into the world anywhere at all for any reason, unless she had a group of people with her. Well, that worked for about 5 days. Meanwhile, with our local trafficking coalition, case management that they had, and myself, we were working hard to find her someplace to go. She missed her dog. We all have our dogs and our animals that we love, and that was a good therapy for her, and she really wanted to see her animal and thought she could sneak out, go see the dog, and get back. And that would have worked all but for the roommate was home. So as soon as she walked out the door from having her quick visit with this animal, phone calls were made. She walked back to the bus stop, and within minutes she was gone. Gone. So the next morning I start getting phone calls, texts, emails, you name it. It was coming from every direction. and she was able to have her phone with her. And again, these people had her so manipulated, they didn't take her phone from her. They didn't need to. But she was sending like one word to a probation officer that said help. She was sending a word or two to me that said various things, to a case manager with the Human Trafficking Coalition. It all started to funnel back. I was able to communicate with her just enough to figure out where she was in Loudoun County. About the time I started rolling units toward her, the next text I got was a picture of a GPS, and she was in the back of a semi headed down I-75. For those of you who don't know, getting folks to Atlanta to get them to Saudi Arabia is a huge problem with traffickers, and that's where she was headed. She just didn't know it at the time. Through the alphabet soup of organizations, the TBI was a huge component in this. We were able to get that semi pulled over north of Atlanta, ever so slightly north. Between pinging her cell phone, pinging that truck, we were able to get that truck pulled over. When they opened the door of the truck and the officers grabbed that man out of the truck, she busted out the side door and flew to the only officer that wasn't pointing a gun at the truck for safety. She ran for her life. She had been drugged, raped, beat on, you name it, it happened in under 24 hours that she was gone. They took her to various places, moved her multiple times through Anderson County, Loudoun County, before they headed to Atlanta with her. It took them 6 hours to process her at the hospital, and I was able to get her back to Knoxville safely. Now that resulted in another uncomfortable conversation with a bunch of attorneys. We're going to circle back to where she is today. I'm going to give you just some general statistics on trafficking and what that actually looks like. There's 27.6 million people in the world in a trafficking situation today. There's 49.6 million people living in some sort of slavery right now. 22 million people are forced into marriage as a result of trafficking. Now, the definition of human trafficking is a very broad term. It can be the use of force, fraud, coercion to get somebody to do something that they don't want to do. It can be violence, it can be through manipulation, it can be through false promises, and it can be through romantic relationships. And that is a huge one in this area. So the people that are typically targeted the most are the people who are psychologically or emotionally in a vulnerable state. Talking about Tori, lost her children, got addicted, easy target. They could have economic hardship, they could have lack of a social network, so nobody around's paying attention. They don't have family or friends that's looking out for them. Natural disasters is another big one, as well as like countries where there's political instabilities. So our local Knox, the human trafficking organization that we have here in Knoxville covers 33 counties in East Tennessee. Just some quick stats on them. They had 407 referrals last year. That's from 33 counties. For 2023, they were over that number in the first 2 months of this year. They gave 2,000 people safe places, 2,000 nights of safe sleep last year. They worked with 231 youth, or 213 youth survivors, and 194 adult survivors. They gave 4,300 hours of therapeutic support, and they trained over 5,000 people in our community about what human trafficking is. And I think that number is probably one of the most important ones out of all of that, because they trained folks. Now they're getting more referrals because people know what they're looking for. I can't speak highly enough about the folks that run our organization here in town. They are amazing. They can get a phone call from the hotline, and they will, if it's somebody that's a family member that's like, I think my husband, brother, cousin, sister, wife, whatever, is in jail, I think they're being trafficked. The next thing I'm getting is a phone call within 15 minutes, and usually within 2 hours, they're at my door. They're there to see those people. Sometimes the people won't take the services because they think the guy that's trafficking them loves them. I've got a young lady that's sitting in custody right now. The guy that trafficked her has trafficked her for about 16 years. 16 years of her life. She's my age. She's in her 40s. I can't get into that whole thing a whole lot simply because there's an ongoing investigation, and he's going to go down, and I'm going to watch. But that's what happens, is these folks get themselves into a situation where people coerce them with drugs, and they use their romantic relationships. They love them, they care about them, they're providing them a place to live, they're buying them clothes, they're making sure they eat, and they hold them in this situation. What's even further alarming, particularly for females, is these men love these females so much that the females will then traffic other females. And that is the primary thing I see, is because one female doesn't think another one's going to traffic them, so they'll trust them. And then there ends up with a whole slew of women who have been trafficked by a female. And I've watched that happen over and over and over again. And the female that's at the top of that food chain, so to speak, is getting victimized on both sides. And those people typically have had some sort of trauma in their past. They're addicted. They're dealing with all kinds of other psychological things. And so anybody who shows them attention and love, I use that term loosely, they'll do whatever they're asked. It's disturbing for the rest of us to look at. I will tell you that folks that are transgender are targeted heavily to be trafficked. I've watched that happen several times. And I will applaud our coalition because they will stand behind those folks no matter what. One thing that I find interesting is when I was working with Ross, is I discovered that in this country, we don't have any programs for males over the age of 25 in the country to assist these survivors. So if you're 18 to 25, there's one program for you in Texas. That's it. I will say that our lovely therapist that's working on her PhD that works for the coalition's working on a curriculum to fix that problem. But it's a growing issue here in town. I don't know if it's growing because more people are starting to understand it and see it, or if it's growing across the country, but because we have our lovely interstates right through Knoxville, we are a quick trip to Nashville and a quick trip to Atlanta, and it's easy to throw these people on a plane and get them out of the country. It's highly disturbing. I will say that TBI has stepped up our game. We have an entire group of folks that's all they do is focus on getting the traffickers in handcuffs and off the street. And they do a great job. The county and the city also have done a good job at training our officers to try to recognize it. And obviously you've got to gain the trust of the person usually to get them to tell you what's going on. But it happens. Everybody looks so sad. So let me give you a little positivity. We'll go back to Ross. Ross is in the process of getting custody of his youngest child back. He has a safe place to live, that he's all by himself. He's had a year of sobriety almost. He just got his driver's license back, and he's got a job where nobody's forcing him to do any kind of sex acts, and he loves it. He goes to therapy on a regular basis. He does everything he needs to do to move his life forward, and he is no longer living in a life of fear. He is successful every day. I got a picture of him just earlier this week with his driver's license, and a big smile on his face. And, I had to fight the prosecutor to let him out of custody the last time because he just didn't think he would make it. And I want you to know, every single time he hits another milestone of success, that prosecutor hears about it from me. Because they need to know that people change and people can be successful. No matter what's happened to them, people are resilient and strong, and they overcome. Miss Candy, as we were talking about, I spoke to just on Friday. She now has a legitimate boyfriend who actually does love her. She's living in an apartment. She has graduated the program here in town. She graduated that about 6 months ago, and she's doing absolutely amazing. She's got a job she loves, and she's still engaging with services to make sure that she stays on track. She's sober, guys. She hadn't been sober since she was in high school. And I will say she is the only individual in all my 6 years of doing this job that I've ever gotten an emergency warrant because I feared for their death. So it took a little while to get her on track, but she's doing great. And last but not least, Miss Tori. So in the ways of the court system, it's not set up for people who need to leave the state of Tennessee. If you didn't know, the way probation is set up for the state of Tennessee is that you stay in this state. You don't get to leave unless you go through a major process to do so. The state you want to move to has to accept you, or you can't go. So we found a program for her that was in Washington State, and Washington State wouldn't accept her. So in the process of all of this, again, while I had her in a safe house and nobody knew where she was, my judge said, "You tell me what to do." He surrendered to the situation because it was an unprecedented thing of having somebody in such a dangerous situation. So we moved her to what's called unsupervised probation. She's still on probation, but she's not reporting anybody other than me. She's in an undisclosed location in New England. I'm the only person who knows where she is, other than perhaps a couple of family members, and all they know is the state. They don't know where she is exactly. She is a year clean. She's sober. She's in church every time the doors are open. She is about 4 months ago, moved into her own place. She graduated the program she was in. She's still engaging in services. And this week she adopted a dog. So she is doing everything she needs to do, up to and including she's starting to gain a relationship back with her younger children through phone calls and video calls. So the thing that set her off is the thing that's, starting to put her back together. So she's doing amazing, guys. So as hard as it is to hear and as depressing it is to know that these things are happening, when these folks are given some love and support, they can turn things around and get their lives back. But when they're in the beginning stages of this, it's really very hard for them to understand they don't have to live like that anymore. I've got several young ladies right now sitting in custody, and I say that phrase more often than I want to. You don't have to live this way anymore. Please let me help you. So again, if you want more statistics or more information about what's going on here as far as our Trafficking Coalition, please look on their website. It's growfree.org. I think it's growfreetennessee.org. And you can see the smiling faces of all the wonderful people who work there, and there are ways to help on their website as well. I love those folks, and they do some amazing, amazing work. The therapist there, Katie, is in her mid-20s, but she's got an 80-year-old inside of her. She does great work with a lot of these folks. So she doesn't function like a 20, whatever she is, but she's got the wisdom of an 80-year-old. So what questions do you guys have?
I'll get the microphone here.
Yeah, she's got the wisdom of an 80-year-old. She kind of reminds me of my grandmother when she speaks.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much, and you are a powerful storyteller. So,
Thank you.
yeah. Are there any, I suspect there will be a number of comments and questions, yeah.
So what can we do to help? And you said there's signs to look for. Can you tell us that?
Signs to look for are people who tend to get isolated. Like they've got folks that they don't, their phones, their social media, those kind of things start being kind of looked about, and you can, there's a fine line between being paranoid and the jealous boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever. But somebody who continues to get more and more isolated, where they're not able to do what they want to do when they want to do it, kind of thing. For folks who, they start kind of hiding away, or they kind of put one human being on a pedestal. I have seen that, where that's the only person that matters. And the isolation is the biggest part of that, because you know, if they're in love with this person, they tend to start shutting the rest of the world out. And the drug addict, you can start watching, you know, they'll disappear for a few hours and come back. And that's usually because they're told to go perform some sort of sex act, or, you know, it could be a labor situation. But if we look at Ross, for example, he was able to completely cover it up from the professionals. But he was being basically trafficked for labor and for sex. I mean, and he was sober through a vast majority of that.
Thank you very much. Have anybody seen the movie Sound of Freedom, which is about trafficking? You need to see that movie. That's international trafficking, but that had to do more with kidnapping and transporting to faraway places. Mm-hmm. My big question is that you're doing a great job right here. What kind of cooperation is Tennessee getting, the other counties, with you, and what have you seen with other states? Because we hear a lot about fentanyl, but we don't hear a lot of solutions to fentanyl. It keeps coming over, and it's a drug, and the kids are not only addicted to drugs, they're addicted to phones. There's all kinds of things going on here, but you've done a great job. But if you haven't seen that movie, that's really an interesting movie about a gentleman in California who devoted his life to save a couple kids that were kidnapped in South America. He was so strong. Sound of Freedom.
So you're asking about the drugs and how they're moving here?
Well, I know the drugs are here, but Mary, are you getting cooperation with your efforts here in Knox County, with other counties, with other states?
So we have a drug task force here in town that is kind of oversaw by the DA's office, and they work, it's KPD and the Sheriff's Office, and they work with the DEA, and they work with the surrounding counties and the surrounding areas. So a lot of the drugs that come to this area are coming either from China or they're coming from Mexico. A handful of it's coming up from South America through Florida, but a lot of it is coming from, unless it's changed in the last bit, but it comes up and it comes to Detroit, and then it comes down. And so a lot of it comes way of Detroit, and it's gotten to a place where we just refer to it as the Detroit boys, because so many of them are in custody right now, because we've arrested so many of them here. And so we've got a great team of prosecutors that are coming hard for those folks to try to stop it. But just with supply and demand, like you arrest 3 and there's 4 more that are dealing. So, I mean, I don't know that it'll ever be stopped. We're just slowing it down. But there is a huge group of folks that are working with TBI, you know, and DEA to fix the problem best they can. But I don't know that we'll ever fix it. But Detroit is where the majority of the drugs come from here.
The 3 cases that you talked about, at what point do they stop looking over their shoulder and feeling like they're okay, they're safe?
Well, every case is a little different. In Ross's case, we knew where some of his folks were because they were in TDOC custody in, you know, West Tennessee, so we know that they're not getting out of jail anytime soon. And they were in there on completely unrelated anything human trafficking at all. They were in on like a bunch of drug cases. So he knows where they are. He can Google that up and look at any point in time to see, you know, make sure they're still in custody. He had some distance, and he was able to stop pretty quickly looking over his shoulder. As far as Tori goes, she's not looking over her shoulder at all because nobody knows where she is. She's safe. Unless somebody can bust into my cabinet at work, nobody's gonna know where she is, except me. And Candace, her captors, you know, they had her in Texas, and that's where they still are. So she is just running amok through town, happy as she can be.
And a follow-up, the captors, do they just let go of these people as soon as they're taken into care? They just drop them and say, well,
Well, what I have seen happen is I've had individuals in custody that I knew were being trafficked, and I've had to separate their trafficker, who was also in custody on unrelated stuff, inside the jail because they're still trying to control that individual inside the facility. So the jail isn't a total escape unless we know about it. And then, you know, I managed to put a giant brick wall up, and, you know, they get moved and they can't see each other, and then that slows that down. That doesn't mean that there's not notes being passed and there's not mail coming in. You know, some of that stuff's out of my control, but we do the best we can to make them feel safe while they're there. And then when I get them out, hopefully, you know, we have our great safe house here in town that nobody knows where it is. It's not labeled. It's not in a place you would expect a safe house to be. And it's even when we send somebody, even if we have a public transport document that goes through the court system, within 24 hours we have that sealed, so that if you wanted to go see where somebody was transported, you couldn't. It's sealed up so nobody can get access to it. So we do our best to make sure that facility is never known about. And we have had instances, they have had instances where they've had people trying to come and coerce people back out of the safe house. They have cameras everywhere, and KPD responds pretty quick.
Thank you very much for talking to us about this. 2 questions. Since we're like at the intersection of I-40 and I-75, do you all have access to federal funds as kind of a location where there could be interception of trafficking?
I mean, TBI kind of mans this for the most part, and the TBI agent that's one of the 2 that's assigned to this area, I can tell you she's amazing. She helped me get my young lady back from Georgia and helped coordinate all of that effort that day, and that was on a fly. That was a phone call like, hey, this is what's going on, and she was on it. But I'm sure there are federal funds that do come down for that, and I'm sure that, you know, there's a lot of grant funds that go into our Human Trafficking Coalition that help fund that. It's, from my understanding, completely grant funded, and I'm sure that's federal and state funds.
Mm-hmm. And my other question is, have you all done any PBS specials on this for East Tennessee PBS? It seems like that would get the word out more, you know?
I do know that earlier this year, the Human Trafficking Coalition, one of the news channels did do a story on them. That was back, I want to say February, March timeframe. So it's, you know, the knowledge is growing, but it's growing very slow. I mean, we did, as far as our correctional officers go, we had a training for them earlier this year. Everybody that works inside the jail got a training. And it's now become, from my understanding, part of the academy when anybody's going through to become a police officer that they have to learn about. So the hopes are we can, you know, at least do our part. But a lot of it is truly gaining the trust of that individual to divulge the information. I've got a young lady sitting in custody right now who I sat with her for a 2.5-hour debrief with TBI. There's probably going to be 30 people arrested by the time that's said and done. And she will be moved far, far away, and nobody will know where she is.
I mean, it's too bad that our society has gotten so isolated that it's easy for people to be targeted like that.
Well, so some social media and telephones, everybody's got a phone stuck to them. It makes it easier to be tracked. It makes it easier for somebody to get in touch with you. You know, and having that, you know, makes it easier to manipulate and control.
You mentioned a little bit earlier that there was only one program in the whole United States that actually assisted people over 25. I'm just wondering, just in the state of Tennessee, do we have enough programs to help people navigate through some of these issues?
So I was talking about male programs specifically with that comment. We don't have any male programs in the country for males over the age of 25. As far as the female programs go, because people believe that they're primarily the ones that are trafficked, although that is laughably not the case. That's where the funds have went, and we have probably not enough programs across the country because I am currently holding at least 3 people in custody while I look for the proper program for them. And some of that has to do with what that individual needs or wants, and some of that has to do with bed availability. We have a fabulous program called the Rest Stop in Nashville, and we have another good program, Thistle Farms in Chattanooga. Those are the 2 biggest ones that we have in this state. I believe there's a couple in down toward Memphis as well, but those are primarily 2 the closest to us, and they work with only females, adult females. There are other programs for juveniles, but I don't work with juveniles, so I don't really know those resources.
I was wondering, in this day of information gathering and internet, do some of these people, such as this Tory, who has been relocated to a place where nobody's supposed to know, do they get to change their names?
She can if she wants to. That's totally up to her. She is very safe where she is. She was in a undisclosed location up there in a safe house for the better part of 6 months when she first got there. You know, we have to treat that whole person, and so if a name change is something that they feel like they need to do, then I've encouraged that. You know, as I said, most of these folks are addicts, and most of them are co-occurring, which means they also have mental health issues that we have to address. So it's a lot of work to treat that whole person.
What is that? Is that for the offering? Offering. That's for the offering. Okay, one more here.
How unsafe is it for just like a female or a male to get abducted for sex trafficking here versus, does that make sense what I'm saying? You know?
Not exactly.
Okay, like I took a self-defense class and they said that at the real TJ Maxx that's down next to Westtown Mall, that a woman got grabbed in that parking lot and put in a van because the interstates are so close and like gone. So I just didn't know the risk.
That's happened in Turkey Creek multiple times.
It's happened in Turkey Creek. Just regular people, just abducted or kidnapped or whatever.
Yep.
So it is happening. And
Being aware of your surroundings is the best thing you can do. For example, I was at West Town Mall a couple weeks ago, and my friends jokingly said, "We're going to watch you walk to your car," and I'm like, okay. I mean, I make a giant circle around my car before I get in it, and I'm looking in every car around to see if there's anybody in the cars, and I'm looking under my car, and I'm looking in the back seat of my car before I unclick anything. So knowing your environment, knowing who's around you, people, especially nowadays, especially with cell phones, everybody sits in their car when they get somewhere and they're texting people back and making phone calls and stuff. That makes me leery, because why are they sitting there? And then I'm guilty of doing that too, because we're not supposed to talk and drive and text. So just being aware of what's going on around you is the best advice I can give you. The hypervigilance is imperative to keeping you safe, because if you're making eye contact with somebody, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to do anything to you. So, because they don't want to be seen.
Samantha,
It makes you human when you make eye contact with somebody.
could you say just a little bit about the people who are doing the are doing the trafficking? I got the impression listening to you that it just tends to be individuals, but is that
No,
the
there's
case?
entire organizations that work together to move these folks, especially the organizations that move them to foreign countries. For a while, and I would imagine it's still going on. We were moving, women were getting picked up from wherever and sent to Saudi Arabia for the princes there, I guess. But no, there's organizations, and then there are the one person that happens to be, I don't want to use the word kingpin, but somebody who is dealing a lot of drugs and they have a lot of access, and then it's like, wait a minute, if I also start running these girls, I can make more money. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any more questions or comments? We have several people who are with us through YouTube, and basically so far the comments that I have seen have not been questions, but have been thanking you for bringing this to us and talking about what good information and what powerful but difficult information it is. Curtis does say, it sounds like there is a lot of support. Is there a way to get ahead of this? Maybe a program for anyone who is incarcerated. Is that a part of what you're doing?
I don't know if it's a program perhaps, but having more people trained, and it's going to take that person to trust us with that information. I've always, as crazy as it sounds, I've always I've taken it as a sign of respect and trust, because I've had many men who have divulged their sexual assault trauma to me, and I was the first person in their life they ever told. These men walk around with it, and they've been holding on to it since they were, young. So gaining their trust is a big part of that. And then just teaching people that it exists, that it's happening right here in this town.
Great. Thank you very much.
Guys, thank you. One day I'm going to come back and we're going to talk about puppies and smiley faces and, fun things.
Thank you so much, Samantha. So, wow. In just a few minutes, while we sing, we will take an offering to support the work that this congregation does, both here within our congregation and in the wider community. Our Share the Plate partner for this quarter is the Unitarian Universalist Association. As a member congregation of the UUA, it's important that we support the good work of our denomination just as they support us. And I would invite you to go to uua.org if you don't know a lot about what UUA does or are just curious and want to find out. We are experimenting with how we're doing the offering, and we may be making some changes soon. This morning, we will be passing the plates. But we also have a collection box right at the back of the room there beside Diane. You can put money in the slot in the top, or there is a QR code on the front of that box. You can use that. There is also a QR code in your order of service, and you're welcome to do it, and online as well. If you want to give directly to our Share the Plate partner, there is another link on our website that you can do to do that, or I believe there are some envelopes available at the back of the room also. This morning, as Sandra plays, we're going to sing From You I Receive, to You I Give, Together We Share, and with that we live. Let's do it one more time. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live. Well, as we close our service today, I do want to really thank Samantha for being here with us this morning and helping to open our minds and our hearts to this issue. We have supported the work that Samantha does in the past through helping her have the supplies that she needs for people, and not just who are being trafficked, but all the people who are under her care as they are coming out of jail or the prison system. And we will continue to do that. You've got a list there in your order of service, and this is also in our newsletter. And so if you can help by bringing in any of these items for the next few weeks, we will be collecting these. We have if you brought some things today, there is a plastic bin out in the foyer where you can put those. We have another very worthwhile collection going on too that you can read more about in the order of service and in the newsletter of period products for teenage girls in the Lenore City schools. As we close, I would invite you to stand if you would like, and join hands if you would like to do so. And we will close with these words. Though we extinguish the chalice the light of community, the light of truth, and the fire of commitment will remain alive in our hearts until we are together again. Go in peace and passion.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Good stories.
Oh, that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Well, my background is psychology.